लिसन, मेरे पैसे कब दे रहे हो?
आज दे देता हूँ मैं सर।
अच्छा दे देना।
Hey Saira, can I borrow 5,000 rupees from you?
Sure, let me check. It's your lucky day.
Ah. That's nice. Hey sir, here's your money back.
Thank you.
Osama's situation is perhaps a perfect depiction of the state of economic affairs in Pakistan. Like him, Pakistan too is stuck in a cycle of taking new loans to repay old loans. And before you know it, you fall into a situation where the amount of debt you owe spirals out of control. And that, my friends, is what we call a debt trap. Because you see, there is no free lunch. In the global banking system, every loan comes with interest, and when that interest piles up, you're in trouble. It's similar for countries when the income generated through trade, taxes, and other economic activities is insufficient and the interest standing upon its outstanding loan amount continues to pile up. It means that the country's debt obligations exceed its repayment capacity. Let's put it this way. You're making less money than you need to live and also repay the money you owe others. This will eventually lead you to avail fresh new loans to clear off the piled up interest. And now that we know what a debt trap is, let's talk about how to escape it.
What is a debt trap, right? Let's try and understand that. So it's a vicious cycle of debts that, let's say, a weak nation, economically weak nation, takes on new debt to repay old loans, until the debt burden gets to a point or goes beyond a point where you are unable to do so, and you tend to fall in the bracket where you may default on the payments, whether that's external or domestic. So there are two kinds of debt. So let's think about a couple of countries, right? More recently, the one which could not escape this is Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka could have done this if they had stuck with the IMF program. So one way when you get into a balance of payments challenge in the short term is to stick with an IMF program, use IMF as an anchor so that you can get the necessary external funding so that you don't get into a default. Sri Lanka was unable to do so. Then they still went back to the IMF, and that's an important point for the policymakers across the world, especially in Pakistan. Then there have been other examples of a similar kind of thing. Jamaica and Uruguay, they have been in with the IMF, and they were with the IMF, and they were able to avoid a full-blown crisis and steered through. Let's think of another example where a country was able to do this on its own. In 1991, when Manmohan Singh came in as the finance minister in India, instead of taking these short-term measures of getting money ward off a default kind of situation, he took very solid measures. And how do countries permanently get out of this? So fiscal discipline is number one. Where are you creating debt? You are creating debt where your local expenditure and your local revenue have a gap. So you have to take on both domestic and external debt to fulfill that gap. Number two, on the external front, you have a balance of payments challenge because let's say your imports, where you are paying up to buy foreign goods and services, are more than what you make, whether it's in exports, whether it's in remittances, whether it's in foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment. These are the main sources. So let's say you're not being able to. So you restructure your economy, and I think India did at that time, and they went into an export-led growth. They went into getting more remittances, getting foreign direct investment into India, and I think they were able to then sustain this, where today they stand at nearly $600 billion of reserves. Let's think through Pakistan's debt and where it stands today. One, we can't be casual about this. We have to be very, very careful when we think about this. So let me put at the outside, I think what Pakistan needs on the external side is more of a debt reprofiling than a debt restructuring. If I was managing the Pakistan's finances, I would take it more so on the debt reprofiling side. Debt restructuring may create more jitters and ripples, which may not be good for the country. So what do I mean by debt reprofiling? I mean, debt reprofiling is short of debt restructuring, and it is about lengthening of the maturities with no change in principal or the interest payment. So let's think the next year, right? We owe about $25 billion that we have to service on the external side. I think out of those $9 billion or something that could be easily reprofiled, because this is the deposit that we have from China, UAE, and KSA. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Let's say we were to reprofile this hypothetically over for 5 years, the principal, and we just keep paying the interest payable or the markup or the profit, whatever you want to call it. So here's 9 billion out of my 25 billion. That creates a very different profile of my external debt. So then you have the 14 billion. Large part of that would be payable to the multilaterals. Then there's, I think, $1 billion payment on the in April 2024 on the commercial. I think we should pay up that, and that should be fine. On the more commercial loans that we have with the banks, there we can get into a negotiation of some kind of reprofiling again, without a haircut. And then, you have those bilateral partners, China, where you have a longer term debt. And, I think Pakistan, about 30 billion is with China. So China is at another level where you can have this negotiation with them as well. Then I think about you have 10% with the Paris Club. So we've done a Paris Club rescheduling before. If you want to think on those lines, that's something to think about. But IMF and multilateral are creditors where there is no reprofiling or restructuring taking place. So that will only happen if we could take new debt to pay that and then build our economy. And the IMF also, I strongly feel that we need to get into another program, a bigger program in June, so that all these things can work on a more smoothened way. In the end, I would always say the areas that need deep attention are all areas which need stronger economic governance, whether it's how do you move your domestic resource mobilization from 10% of GDP to 15% of GDP, and then improving the overall debt management. We need a much stronger debt office in Pakistan, which can see through these things and see through them more quietly, so that this doesn't send more jitters to the international and domestic investor in Pakistan.